did not like consultants, right? Because I had this experience that was they don't actually do the work. They just like tell you kind of things. And then that's like more work for me. So like that's not helpful. I don't want that. I already have enough work, right? Like so that's kind of where I think my model is like a little bit different where it's no, I'm getting in there and I'm like doing your work for you essentially. But like versus, I could point and shoot all day, but that's not going to help anyone.
Welcome to the Blue Ocean Solutions podcast, where we dive into real conversations with business owners, innovators, and industry leaders reshaping the future of clean tech, renewables, and the construction industry. I'm Kreel Hutchinson, your host. Our guest today is Schmidt, the renewable energy consultant at Catalyst in the Denver area. Today, we're going to discuss her journey from construction to becoming a fully booked consultant, helping utility scale renewable energy projects navigate volatility and scale effectively. If you're a founder, an executive, a project manager in clean tech, renewables, or energy-aligned construction sectors, you will love this show, for it is the insights in optimizing project delivery and scaling operations in a dynamic industry. It's an example of how deep industry expertise, combined with strategic consulting, can drive significant growth and overcome operational challenges. Welcome to the Blue Ocean Solutions podcast, Cass.
Hey, thanks for inviting me here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I was really looking forward to this conversation. You're the first consultant I've had on the podcast, so I'm really interested to kind of dive into your world and what you're seeing in the industry. So for people who may not know you, why don't you introduce yourself, who you are, where you are, what you do, and your company.
All right, sounds good. So hello, once again, I'm Cass. Gosh, my background, as you mentioned, is in construction. Went to school for construction management at a small state school up in Minnesota, which is where I grew up. Straight out of school, was lucky enough to get hired on with a really large contractor. At the time, I think they were like the third largest in the nation, which gave me the ability to go see just a ton of different types of projects from, my early 20s on. So yeah, got to spend a bunch of time on job sites building heavy civil projects, like worked on some bridge work, did some government work, worked on a big industrial plant. Kind of see, some of the pictures behind me in hard hats are from some of those journeys. And then about, what year are we? We're in 2026, it turns out. We love that. About a little over 10 years ago now. Yeah, I've been like 12 or 13 years ago. I basically got a job offer to go run some wind project or some wind sites as a project manager. And once I went into wind, I just kind of never looked back. I really enjoyed doing utility scale renewables and expanded that into solar, expanded that into BESS. Started to kind of move from, still stayed in like the construction side for the most part, but moved from like that operations side of construction into business development, moved into some executive roles, helped open up some operating groups. And then about 2 years ago, got kind of the bug and the itch and had kind of like the thought of like, well, what would happen if I were to start my own company? And had some different folks that were kind of poking at me saying like, hey, have you considered this? It might not be a bad idea. And a year ago went basically full on by myself, I guess is the way to say it. Like started out, announced my business, Catalyst Energy Consulting. Within about 2 months, I was fully booked, and I'm still fully booked till now. Um, we'll talk about it later, but actually had a conversation this week where I've got a client that wants me to expand. So it's been awesome and completely unexpected to be as successful as it has been. So I'm just super grateful for the industry and glad that I made the choices that I made, I guess.
Yeah, indeed. So before we get into the bigger aspect of your business, what was that driving motivation to move from kind of being an employee working for other big companies to kind of expanding out on your own? What was that tipping point? What was the pull, the magnet inside there?
It's so wild because my goal, like when I was going to school, right? Like, and my goal out of school was to really follow in that kind of boomer paradigm where like the same thing that my folks did, which is like I wanted to find a really good company, which I got lucky enough to find. I was going to work for them for 30 years. I was going to retire a millionaire and it was going to be great. And like that was the plan, right? And then it just kind of turned out that like not everyone fits within the corporate paradigm. So that was a little part of it of kind of the lack of flexibility that comes with the security that you get working a full-time job just started to get a little bit stifling. And I just kept seeing such a need for more flexibility. And I just kind of kept questioning that 40-hour work week model just didn't seem like it was really nimble enough to meet the needs of the folks in the industry. And so it wasn't really meeting my needs. And it seemed like it was something that was creating kind of like an unnecessary burden on especially renewables with our volatility, which I think volatility just seems like kind of like a negative way of putting it. I think it's just it's going to be dynamic, right? Like it's a still a new-ish industry. It is very innovative, so which are good things, right? It has a lot of growth, which I think is a good thing. So I kind of like to look at it more as we've got such a big opportunity. I don't want that opportunity to get bogged down or slowed down or lost because we're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, essentially, right? Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. So then talking about life as a consultant, what does your world look like? What does a normal week for Cass looks like in consulting role?
Oh, it's wild. It depends on the week, it depends on the month, and it depends on when you're asking me. It if you would have asked me that same question like a year ago, I would have been like, "It looks terrifying. Everything looks terrifying." Now that I've kind of settled in and we have a bit of a routine, it it's I still probably do like around like the same like 40 hours of work, I would say. It's just that 40 hours is not contiguous. It's gonna be like an average because it's gonna be some weeks are gonna be more like 50, 60, and then some weeks I just don't really have much to do, which we love. And it's a really fun mix of work, which is my favorite part. Going back to like reasons why I made the switch into consulting, I have been lucky enough. I don't think I thought I was that lucky at the time, but throughout my career, I've worked a lot of different roles and I've seen a lot of different stuff. So I've been able to gain a lot of different knowledge bases across the utility scale pipeline, right? Or across a renewable pipeline. So what's super fun for me is, oftentimes when you're in that like salaried role or you're in that corporate role, you're not able, like, you have to kind of stick to whatever your department does and whatever your job description is, like that's kind of it, right? You don't get to go outside of it. Whereas in my week, it's like I might be spending a little bit of time doing some invoicing and some accounts payable, right? Which isn't my most favorite, but it's a change of pace and it's kind of nice, easy work. You know what I mean? So you have a mix of doing that. I might be on the phone with a client helping them solve like a technical problem because they have a new product and they're not quite sure how it's going to get built. So I'm answering some just kind of basic questions around, oh, this is what OSHA would say about it. So, like, we actually can't do it that way. Or, like, technically, we're out of spec with this. So, you're probably going to want to pivot in this direction. I like to save a good couple of hours for mentorship. So, I've got some folks that are a little bit younger in their careers that I'll save some time to kind of help them out with their businesses that they're wanting to get started and some of their career growth. I've got a client that I help them out with document control, which is something that I did 2 years out of college. And it turns out when you're 20 years into your career, it's really, really easy to do, but super helpful. Like it's one of those weird that doesn't seem like a big deal, but the amount of relief that it gives my client, it makes it so satisfying and worth it. And then, yeah, a lot of the rest of the time is just kind of that business development networking, just kind of staying up with all of my contacts. I'm a pretty heavy relationship person. That's actually why I made the jump from operations into business development when I did, just because I think that I don't know, I think in this industry especially, the relationships that you build here are just, they're so important. And I've gotten so much help from folks, in my network that I want to make sure that I'm reciprocating and doing the same. And I think with how dynamic like we said, our industry is, stuff changes so quickly that if you're not talking to people, you're not gonna, you know, you can get the little market reports that tell you like what's happening in the industry. But for me, it's like it resonates a lot more when I'm talking to Bill or Sally and they're telling me because of this tariff change or because of this new law, these projects are now on hold. And now I'm trying to scramble to find a solution for X, Y, and Z. Right. So kind of helps me keep more current. So yeah, I don't know
Ye-
everything. And I teach. That's another thing I do. I'm an adjunct professor. So that's a bunch of time grading and talking to students. Yeah.
Cool. With you being, I kind of see your role being a consultant and leveraging your network and staying connected in there. You've got a really good pulse, maybe for what's happening in the industry, right? What are the conversations that businesses are having and having with you? So, do you want to play some inside baseball and let us know what do you think are the biggest impacts or the biggest trends that you're seeing in the industry and the conversations are really being built around, whether they're successful, like, opportunities or challenges?
One of the biggest challenges that I've been really seeing is, which is part of like why I started the business the way I did, but the challenge that comes with that is that you need someone now. By the time you've decided you need to hire someone, it's generally too late. And and like it's always someone that needs to be pretty qualified to do the work. But the flip side of it is in our industry, the workload, we're not accountants, right? And we're not building, like, we're not a manufacturing plant. So, like, our workflow and our projects are going to be very dynamic. So, like, we might have like a whole bunch of work for these 3 months. And then once that work is accomplished, now that person is sitting on the bench for 9 months and we're trying to figure out what to do with them. One of the things that I'm actually seeing a lot more like consultant activity kind of following a similar model to mine, and that I'm sure I'm following others on, which is it's kind of temp staffing, but it's more of like an elevated temp staffing where because it's more relationship based, like folks that reach out to me they've worked with me, so they know that they trust that they'll get the quality of work that they've already kind of seen me do because we've already probably worked together in some capacity, be it direct or kind of indirect. So I would say like just kind of going from a high level, that dynamic side of the industry where you do see like work kind of pick up and work drop off, and energy in general just being really susceptible, and our industry being really susceptible to outside forces. I mean, I don't think anyone's really escaped it in the last year, but it's been a wild year. Like, we don't know if there's going to be a tariff or not going to be a tariff. We're now at war, I think. So that's like something that is now going to affect, the pipeline of gas prices, right? And that means all of your logistics and all of your transportation, and the way that we get projects built is by moving a whole bunch of stuff to one area to have a project, right? And when you're on that project, it takes a bunch of pickup trucks to drive around these big, 1200 acre up to, 20 mile by 20 mile square sites, right? So it's just been kind of wild where I think a lot of I would say, like, current administration changes that we're seeing, I think that has been, affecting us more, be it materially or just taking up time. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, even if it doesn't affect you materially, you still have to go through all the time and effort to digest what just happened. And when you're spending the time to digest what just happened, you're either paying someone to do that for you, which is going to be an expenditure on your company, or you're losing productivity somewhere else, right? Like I can't develop a project if I'm knee deep in, uh, looking at
Fear,
new.
yeah,
Yeah.
fear, bureaucracy, and uncertainty for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you guys at Catalyst then help clients navigate that volatility? And also, if you could give us an example or examples of a bunch of the different clients that you have and the work that you're doing for them.
Yeah. Really, the best way that I'm helping them out with that is I'm kind of like we'll call it like the pressure release valve, right? for one of my clients, like one of like the, kind of helping out that document control aspect, it's like a part-time role. It's I guess like what I'm getting at is they don't need someone 40 hours a week to do that job. Uh, and because I've been doing it for a bit longer, I can do that job for kind of a lot faster and I don't really need to be trained up. I just need to get access to stuff because at the end of the day, the stuff that I'm looking at is the same stuff that I've been looking at in operations for most of my career. It's just, now I'm part-time looking at it, which is terribly more awesome than previous. So I think like where I'm helping out clients is, you know, instead of having that, and I don't want to call it a burden, which seems like kind of negative as well, but instead of having that labor burden and having to worry about, there's so much overhead that is involved in that hiring process, right? Like, not only do you have all the time of going through like 3 interviews and picking people, you have the time of sifting through all of the resumes, you have the time of picking out someone. And then let's face it, like, it takes 3 months to get someone spun up to be functional, like, no matter what. Like, it doesn't matter how qualified they are. It's just that's kind of how it works procedurally, especially if you were to hire someone doing like one of the roles that I'm doing, you would have hired probably more of like I would say like a 3 to 5 year out of school person. And because of that, now there's going to be a lot more training that goes with it because they're going to be a lot newer and greener. You're going to hire them at like a lower rate annually, like a lower salary. But like I've been doing this role for 3 months and was able to get the work done from day one. If they would have hired someone, they would have had to wait those 3 months to get the same work done. Right. So it just kind of keeps things a bit more efficient. And like I go in and I tell this to my clients, my goal is to kind of Mary Poppins my way out. Like I want to stabilize. I want to get you, like I want to get up right where you want to be. And then I want you to give me someone that I can train that can take this over, when we're kind of over that big hurdle so that I don't want my clients to feel like they're also kind of stuck with me either, right? Like I want them to feel like they've got options and opportunities if it comes up.
Well, as you describe and frame that, that sounds like a really healthy position. And I'm sure it's quite appealing to clients. And I also better understand why you're having so much success and why you're, fully booked right now because you're basically companies that have problems rather than just hiring someone to fix that problem, they hire you temporarily to put out the fire and set them straight rather than
Exactly.
having to like build a whole team to prepare for the fire that's already
Mm.
happening and then all the infrastructure. So it kind of clicked for me being like, oh, wow, now, if you're seeing that, is the overall industry also like for other consultants, there's a lot of work available because these business owners have basically come to the conclusion this is a better way to solve this problem in the short term, but also in my long term budgeting?
I think it's being pushed a lot more because I think we're seeing like, not to take 40 steps way back, kind of weird. We're gonna go on a tangent, but I promise we're gonna get there, okay? I think a lot of it is driven by millennials. So I think what we're seeing is kind of a reaction to the traditional ways of working, and we're seeing a lot of folks, my age, I think we're probably similar in the same age that have now kind of grown into like those like middle management spots where like, I mean, we're all at that like 40 point where we have 20 years of experience, right? And 20 years is like a really nice benchmark of like, I feel confident I know what I know. But I think there's something about we're always associated with the gig economy. And I think consulting is kind of like our professional way of scratching that gig itch, and having the flexibility that we've wanted now that we're in a marketplace that we can kind of drive around destiny a little bit easier. I know personally I'm a recession baby, so like I graduated in 2008, which was not the most rad time to graduate college. So at that time it was like you just kind of did whatever work anyone was gonna give you. I was hungry for work because I just think it's all fascinating. And I think, at least what I'm seeing with a lot of my colleagues, is we're seeing a lot of us kind of spin off. And then I think the work is starting to kind of come to us because that's kind of your best option to get us that are in this realm, you know?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think we're seeing kind of like now we're starting to see more proof in the pudding where like that example I gave you, right? Like I've been working with that client since about September. So it's like we're kind of like, I don't know, like 4 to 6 months in where they're going, wow, this was a really big value. Now I want to take this model and like expand it into more of like a portfolio look versus just like a singular project stability because all of our projects need the same type of help if we're actually looking at it. And then I think, gosh, like I guess if we're kind of looking on a macro level, another thing I think that's going to help or continue driving that is we're seeing a lot more, we're just seeing so much more Wall Street investment in renewables than what we ever have. Like there's so much private equity money out there right now, just so much. I like to just lump it all together and just say like Wall Street money, whereas before I think renewable, and that's where we're seeing renewables taken more seriously. But again, because the nature of the work is volatile, consulting is a nice way that you can mitigate that risk. I know like when you're kind of working from a like a P backed scenario, you really have to worry about like what do your books look like every 3 months? Like what are your quarterly numbers? What are you showing? And even with the publicly traded companies, that's such a big deal of where your expenses are at and no one wants overhead, right? So I think it's just like kind of an easy way to eliminate some of that overhead or that intrinsic overhead. And then from just like a capex kind of scenario, I think there's like more that you can do with consultants in terms of where I fall on your income statement, right? Versus like a direct hire would fall. So I think there's a few more tax advantages that you get from, going outside and hiring someone like me versus, you know, having that like in person, yeah, hire.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you guys are basically fully booked. You're expanding your team, which is fantastic. What's the biggest challenges and opportunities you foresee for scaling Catalyst while maintaining the service quality?
That's it. That's what's gonna keep me up at night. Thanks. You nailed it.
Yeah, you got any ideas?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that are stressing me out with it. So one, obviously maintain the service quality, which as I'm working through the scaling and like kind of building out that plan, this has been in the back of my brain for a while. And part of why I keep up my network the way I do is that I already have some folks handpicked that I trust that I think will do excellent at this work and just as good as me, if not significantly better than me, more than likely. So I think just you know, I'm seeing kind of the payoff for the amount of time and effort that I've been putting into just like maintaining the network and kind of keeping my eyes open with the who's and who kind of seems like they'll be available. Um, so I think that's helping with it in terms of like the quality of work. I trying to stay balanced and just kind of know like I'm gonna keep a pulse on all of it as it comes out because I can't not, but I know I'm gonna have to, figure out where my control let go happens and my trust kind of starts. So that I think is gonna be tricky. And then another thing that's been weighing heavily on me that is part of how I'm going to, I think, help keep the quality of work high is that I'm working hard to come up with an extremely equitable model for anyone I bring into Catalyst as a consultant that's doing the same work as me. I really want to get away from the pay people as little as humanly possible that you can get away with model where folks feel like they have to really fight for it and keep it more of like a direct mathematical equation of here's what our client is willing to pay us once we take out the cost of running the business and my time that I need to
Okay.
commit. So that way I'm still made whole, making sure that a whole bunch of that goes to the other consultant that's working with me, right? I don't wanna inadvertently scale into something I never liked. So
Yeah. I get it.
a little
You're
off
going to do
the
great, Cass.
super naive
I
and doing my
think
best.
I think your experience and your heart's in the right place. I think people will be very happy to like join you. Basically, I see you becoming the CEO of a consulting business, right? And bringing on consultants and being their boss. I think you'd be a great boss. And
Thank you.
so I think things are going to look really good with all your experience and your awareness around how you want to keep that quality high. You'll get the right people on board. So as we move forward, looking into the future, What are your thoughts on the role of technology, particularly AI, in optimizing, say, project management, communication, maybe even lead generation with the renewable energy supply chain, like helping your clients integrate those solutions, maybe also your business? What does that look like for you?
Oh man, I love AI. Mostly just because it saves me so much time with like that communication aspect. I know we were talking about a little bit earlier. So so the one thing that I will say is it kind of cracks me up because I feel like every other week there's like some news article that's like AI is going to take away all of our white collar jobs and we are not going to need professionals anymore. One thing I will say in my industry, especially, is it's very human ran. It's not super repeated and it's not very organized. So, like, I don't think we're ever going to see like a huge, like, AI is going to wipe out, all of project management, or we're going to be able to take an entire operating group and just push it through AI. What I do see though is to your point, once I get in and, stabilize whatever the situation is and get that organized, that's now where we can take that, incorporate the AI, and then maybe that's like another backup option towards the stabilization and keeping things steady. And then I can Mary Poppins back out again and, go help someone else in the same way. Right. So I
Yeah.
think there's just, I don't think we even really know how much we can do with it yet. We're tapping the iceberg, but as someone who comes from it's interesting because I come from a very heavy construction background, but I also am very heavily in renewables. So I feel like you have a very, very traditional, doesn't really change a whole heck of a lot industry that is merging with what is essentially one of like the main startup cultures that we saw 20 years ago, right? Renewables is constantly changing, super innovative. Like, you know, your products change like 1 to 2 times, if not more, throughout the or your equipment changes 1 to 2 times, if not more, throughout the course of being hired on to build a project, right? So I'm excited to see where we can start tapping in AI to eliminate a lot of administrative burden and some of like the repeat type things and like a lot of like the reporting type things that I think bog down a lot of our really smart thinkers and our critical thinkers that could be putting that time into solving project problems and making more money and being more innovative versus, I'm spending 5 hours a week doing invoicing, right? It was like one thing that kind of going back to what you were saying of, like where we're finding the benefits and like what we're seeing, you know, I I just heard this week that like my client told me that his boss had told him that like my client had told me, he's like, yeah, when I brought you on, that made me available to push through financial close and make decisions on that. And that is such a big deal in renewables is like having like making sure that you have the time and the availability and the smart thinkers that are accountable and need to have that time and availability to solve and answer real problems and not being bogged down by what essentially is kind of project minutia sometimes, like still important, but not necessarily going to be the thing that's going to ensure you get paid and stay in business. So I think that's something I'm excited to explore and learn more about myself is, how do I work with my clients when I provide services with that as kind of an end goal in mind of incorporating some of that AI and like the technology that we have available to us now to maintain. That's what I'm looking for, to maintain it after I roll out.
Yeah, I think a big part of probably what you do is set up the right systems in place, right, to replace yourself and train people on those, but also leave like the CAS AI agent so that it can
Yeah.
continue to do a bunch of it
Yeah,
for them.
yeah.
Brilliant. So as we look forward, what's the next 6 to 12 months for you look like? And even the industry, if you think there's something, either handle that personally for Catalyst, or what does the next 6 to 12 months look like for the industry?
I'm gonna start with industry and then I'll go to me just because like I'm kind of curious on it. Like industry, I'm super curious on just from what's going on right now with like fuel and oil because that could have like a massive effect in the future. And then just knowing that we don't know what next EO is going to come out and what the next hurdle is. Now, what I will say though is on my end of thing, I guess like these have all come out and they've all happened, and I lived through 2017 when everything was supposed to come to a screeching halt because the tax credit expired, right? And there was a bit of a slowdown, I will say that for me personally, but a lot of that was more a function of just kind of coming off of what was a really, really busy 2015 and 2016, and then the I don't know if we wanna call it or I guess 2016 was, like, the big slowdown. I think a lot of it's just kind of like the balance, right? Like, stuff kinda getting reconciled again. I think for us, I don't see anything massively slowing down. I think we might not experience the same kind of, like, super, super fast growth that we saw in, like, 22 and 23. I don't mind that. I think that's good. Like, I think when we end up with such massive growth so quickly, I've noticed, like, the quality of work started to deteriorate, and I don't think that's good for anyone, especially when, like, we are becoming critical, we're critical infrastructure, right? Everyone needs power. So, like, I don't think it's something I really wanna mess around with poor work. So I guess I would say, and like what I've been kind of telling folks is like, yeah, it's not going to be probably like crazy gangbusters, but like maybe that's okay. Maybe it's just a nice slow steady growth that we keep moving forward with, and like maybe some of like those projects that are not awesome, maybe they don't get built this time, right? I don't know. So, and then I guess the other big shift I'm seeing is like we're going towards mega projects now. So it used to be utility scale projects were big projects, and we were stoked to have anything that was 200 megawatts. And 200 megawatts not big enough now. It needs to be a 500 megawatt project up to like a 1 gigawatt project. And like we're seeing a lot of consolidation of projects. And I think that announcement came out last week of a big IPP selling. So I think that feels like a trend that we're going to see a little bit more Wall Street involvement and movement with some of our IPPs, because I think that's starting to get some attention now. So how that trickles out and affects everyone, I'm not 100% certain, but for my little chunk of the puzzle, it's been great. So yeah,
Well,
the future is bright. I'm very excited for it.
I'm just 100% certain you will be here for it, whatever that future
Yeah,
looks like. Cass, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Before we sign off, why don't you let people know how they can get a hold of you if they want to have a conversation around employing some of the Catalyst services? How do people find you?
great. Well, I've got a website that I can send over to you. That's a pretty easy one. There's like a little thing there where you can basically hit the little email button and it'll go straight to me. I'm also on LinkedIn, which is pretty easy to find me, and would love to run into any folks at any of like the major like renewable conferences. So, reach out on LinkedIn and would love to kind of set up a call or an in-person for sure.
Okay, great. And to our audience, of course, we'll have the website link and the LinkedIn link inside the show notes. Before we sign off, Cass, any final words?
No, just thank you so much for having me. This is really fun. I love talking about work.
Perfect. And to our audience, if you've enjoyed the show as much as we have, please like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to send it with a friend, potentially someone who's looking to get into consulting or thinking of breaking away from their executive level career to do something a little bit more flexible. Maybe they need to hear this. Or somebody's looking to avoid a full-time hire and maybe look for a great consultant to step in and put out the fire. They might also need to hear this. So once again, thank you so much for being here. This is another episode of the Blue Ocean Solutions podcast. Take care, everyone.